I have to be honest with you. When I sat down to write this one, I kept stopping. Because if you grew up watching Hal Williams in Sanford and Son on Friday nights, or with 227 on Saturdays, Hal wasn't a celebrity. He felt like somebody from your own neighborhood. The beat cop who knew your name. The husband who worked with his hands and came home tired but kind. And here's the part that got me. On July 15, 2026, just 2 days before he passed, Hal Williams was in Ohio, back home, laughing at a Sanford and Son reunion with his old partner Hoppy. Then he flew home, went to sleep in his own bed, and never woke up. Stay with me, because the story of how a night shift postal worker became one of the most beloved faces in television history is the story of a promise he made to himself in 1968. Halroy Candis Williams was born December 14, 1934, in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing about his early life pointed toward Hollywood. He worked as a juvenile corrections officer and in child and family services. Steady, honorable work. The kind of jobs a responsible man held on to in 1960s Ohio. But in 1968, at 33 years old, newly divorced, Hal sat down and asked himself a question most of us are afraid to ask. In his own words, "I sat down after getting divorced and said, what do I really want to try to do before the maker comes and gets me? And it was acting. So, I took the plunge and drove to California in 48 hours. 48 hours. Ohio to Los Angeles. No agent, no connections, just some community theater behind him, and a question he refused to leave unanswered. And here's what tells you everything about the man. He didn't gamble his family's security on a dream. He took the overnight shift at the LAX post office and kept a day job with the California Youth Authority, auditioning in the hours between. Small parts came. Dan August, That Girl, Cannon, working man by night, working actor by day. Understand what that grind looked like. He'd finish a night shift sorting mail at the airport, catch a few hours of sleep, and then drive across Los Angeles to stand in casting offices full of younger men with agents and headshots and connections. Casting directors in that era had a narrow imagination for what a black actor in his 30s could play. Hal didn't complain about it. Not then, not later. He just kept showing up, kept being prepared, kept being professional. Directors remembered that. In this business, the man who's easy to work with and always ready gets called back. And Hal Williams was always ready. Remember, too, what was happening around him. This was the late 60s and early 70s. American television was finally, slowly, opening its doors. Norman Lear, through his production company Tandem Productions, was about to change everything with shows that put real black families and real working people at the center of the screen. Hal had arrived in Los Angeles at exactly the right moment, not by luck, but because he'd had the courage to answer that question in 1968, when answering it cost him everything comfortable. Then, in 1972, the door opened. Sanford and Son, Red Fox and Dimond Wilson, junk dealers in Watts. The show itself was adapted from the British sitcom Steptoe and Son, but Norman Lear and Tandem Productions made it entirely their own. A NBC Friday night juggernaut rooted in the specific rhythms of Black American life. Hal was cast as Officer Smith, Smitty, the easygoing neighborhood cop, first alongside Officer Swanee Swanhauser, and then in the pairing America fell in love with, Smitty and the hopelessly square Officer Hoppy Hopkins, played by Howard Platt. And of course, sharing the screen with the incomparable LaWanda Page as Aunt Esther, whose feuds with Red Fox's Fred Sanford are some of the most joyfully vicious moments in sitcom history. The bit was simple and perfect. Hoppy would mangle police jargon and street slang, and Smitty would patiently translate. What most fans never knew is that Hal and Howard wrote much of it themselves. Hal remembered it this way in an interview from 2022. They used to tell us they didn't have anything to do that week and to go make up some lines. So I would go with Howard to a hot dog joint or a hamburger place, and we sit in the parking lot. We would sit there, write stuff and take it back at the end of the day to the run-through. The producer would be on the floor laughing. That's where gems like Hammerhawks and Black-Eyed Rice came from. As Hal put it, Howard was brilliant about corrupting the slang, and through all of it, through a hit network show, Hal Williams kept his overnight post office job. Let that sink in. He was on one of the biggest sitcoms in America, and he still clocked in at the airport post office after dark. Years later, he explained simply, "It wasn't until the kids went away to school that I felt financially able to give up my regular job. Now comes the conflict, the gamble." In 1975, Hal left Sanford and Son to headline a new ABC comedy, On the Rocks, playing inmate Lester DeMott. The ratings were actually good, but the show died after one season because, as Hal told it, viewers wrote letters complaining that it made prison look like too much fun. A hit show, lost to letter writers. For a lot of actors, that's the end of the story. Not Hal. He went back to Sanford and Son in 1976 and picked Smitty's badge right back up. No bitterness, no bruised ego. And when the network revived the franchise as Sanford in 1980, there he was again, walking the same beat. That's a lesson most people in Hollywood never learn. The door you leave gracefully is a door that stays open. And while the comedies paid the bills, Hal was quietly proving he could do so much more. On CBS's The Waltons, he took a recurring dramatic role as Harley Foster, a lumber mill worker hiding a terrible secret. Harley, it turns out, had escaped from prison after being wrongly convicted of killing a man in self-defense. Over multiple appearances, viewers watched this gentle, hard-working man live in fear of being discovered, until in one of the series' most moving payoffs, he receives a presidential pardon from Franklin Roosevelt himself. For audiences used to seeing Hal get laughs, it was a revelation. The man could break your heart. Then came 1980, and the biggest screen of his career. In Private Benjamin, Howard Zief's box office smash, Hal played the drill sergeant tasked with turning Goldie Hawn's pampered Judy Benjamin into a soldier. Tough as leather on the outside, but with a flicker of decency underneath that made the whole dynamic work. The film was such a hit that CBS spun it into a series, and Hal carried his sergeant onto television for 3 full seasons. Think about the range on display in a single decade. A beat cop, a prison inmate, a wrongly convicted fugitive, a drill sergeant, 4 different uniforms, one utterly dependable actor. In 1977, on an episode of The Jeffersons, Hal worked with a sharp comedic actress named Marla Gibbs, Florence the maid herself. Years later, Marla asked him to join her on stage in a play called 227, written by playwright Christine Houston. Here's Hal's confession about that original stage version, and it may surprise you. The stage version was much darker, too earthy and too real to go on television without substantial changes. I was a philandering sleaze in the play, and I was having an affair with the vamp upstairs. When NBC's Brandon Tartikoff and Norman Lear saw the play, they wanted to turn it into a sitcom. Tartikoff, who was reshaping NBC's entire primetime lineup in that era, immediately saw the potential. But their first idea was to make Mary a single woman and kill Lester off entirely. Marla Gibbs refused. As Hal recalled, Marla didn't want her character to be a black woman in the ghetto struggling to raise children, so Lester lived. And thank goodness. From 1985 to 1990, Hal Williams was Lester Jenkins, a man with his own construction company, a devoted husband to Mary, a steady father to Brenda, played by a young Regina King in her very first role. Yes, that Regina King. The future Oscar winner got her start as Hal Williams' television daughter. The show, set in an apartment building in Washington, D.C. and produced by Norman Lear's Embassy Television, ran 5 seasons and made household names of its cast: Marla Gibbs, Jackée Harry, Helen Martin as the sharp-tongued Pearl Shea, and the steady man at the center of it all. And here's what made Lester quietly revolutionary. Television in that era was full of loud husbands, scheming husbands, absent husbands. Lester Jenkins was none of those things. He was patient when Mary meddled. He worked with his hands and provided without complaint. He loved his wife, raised his daughter, paid his bills, and kept his word. For millions of American families, black families especially, but truly all families, seeing that man on screen every Saturday night mattered more than any punchline. Hal knew it too. He played Lester with a warmth you cannot fake, because by then Hal Williams had spent 50 years being exactly that kind of man himself. There's a beautiful symmetry hiding in this chapter, if you look for it. The woman who fought to keep Lester alive on screen, Marla Gibbs, became one of Hal's dearest colleagues. A partnership born on a single 1977 episode of The Jeffersons, and carried through hundreds of episodes of 227. Some of the best things in a long career come down to one person remembering you. One person insisting on you. Marla insisted on Hal, and television is richer for it, and Hal never stopped working. Sinbad's father on The Sinbad Show. Guest turns on Good Times, Hill Street Blues, Magnum P.I., Night Court, L.A. Law, Roots, The Next Generations, and decades later still going. On Parks and Recreation and Mr. Mayor. Films too. Hardcore, The Rookie, Guess Who. 6 decades, never the flashiest name on the call sheet. Always one of the most dependable. He summed up his own career with the humility that defined him. I've been a straight man for a long time. It doesn't bother me, because all I ever aspired to be was a working actor. I've been very lucky. Most of the shows I've been in have been hits, and now the ending. The part I told you about at the top. In July of 2026, 91-year-old Hal Williams traveled back to Ohio, the state where he was born, the state he'd left in a 48-hour drive nearly 6 decades earlier. He went for a celebration of Sanford and Son. There he reunited with Howard Platt, Smitty and Hoppy, together again, more than 50 years after those parking lot writing sessions outside a hot dog stand. Just days before his passing, he was still giving interviews, still reflecting warmly on what Sanford and Son meant to the people who loved it. He flew home to Rancho Mirage. His family says he was tired from the trip. And on the morning of Wednesday, July 15th, Hal Williams passed away peacefully in his own home, of natural causes, at 91. Think about the shape of that life. It began with a question. What do I really want to do before the Maker comes and gets me? And it ended with the answer fully lived. He got to see his old partner one more time. He got to hear, one more time, how much the work meant. And then he went home. Hal Williams leaves behind his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And he leaves the rest of us something rarer. The memory of a man who proved you don't have to be the star to be unforgettable. You just have to show up, do the work, and treat people right. The beat cop who kept the peace with a smile. The drill sergeant with a heart. The husband and father who built something that lasted. Rest easy, Mr. Williams. The Maker came to get a working actor, and found a man whose work was done, and done well. If Smitty or Lester Jenkins was part of your family's living room, share a memory in the comments. This community reads every one. If you'd like more tributes to the legends who shaped those years, subscribing helps us keep telling their stories the right way. Thank you for spending this time with us, and with Hal.